Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we've just been to see Spider-Man, Brand New Day. The 38th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And, you know, I think I've seen all about the first 25 or so. And they got to Endgame. And then because Endgame finished off the story that they've been telling for 10 years in such a big way, suddenly I lost interest. You know,
yes.
Like, how are they going to keep this going? Which we did see the following films, some of them at least. But one of the questions we were asking of those films and of each other was, how are they going to keep this interesting? For me, it has lost a lot of interest, but Spider-Man retains a lot of interest because he's Spider-Man. He's an enduring superhero. You have seen the bloody lot, and we were just talking about the TV shows. You've seen most of those as well.
Yes, I have.
You are a glutton.
Well, you know, it's childhood, basically. I grew up with those comic books. I must say that, you know, because I've always been one of those defenders of popular culture, like, you know, if it's popular, there must be something interesting about, And the Marvel films are kind of very unrewarding. Yeah, like, you know, you try to like it, and yet there are so few, like, really good films amongst them.
Yeah.
It's surprising, I think. So, obviously, I love the Black Panther films. I love the Doctor Strange films. I mean, I could probably pinpoint to some of the others. But, I mean, I mainly enjoy the Thor films because of reading Thor comic books, where the films themselves are not good, right? And you can go on like that for so many of them. It's like you wish they were all better than they in fact are, really. Yeah. And even the Spider-Man films, I mean, you know, I've enjoyed them all, but it's very difficult to say, you know, this is a great masterpiece of the cinema about any of them, right?
And I think this is probably the worst of the 4 Spider-Man films that have been made under the MCU umbrella. I think I've enjoyed all the other 3 more. This has very much that feeling of we're a long way into the storylines these days, and it's the continuing adventures of the thing that happens next to Spider-Man. Obviously, it's a bit more than that. They do have a story to tell that was started at the end of the last one with Doctor Strange casting a spell for whatever reason. It meant it basically saved the world, that everyone had to forget who Peter Parker was. His identity was everywhere. Now he gets to restart. It's his brand new day, as the title suggests. No one remembers who Peter Parker is anymore. Spoilers will be coming up.
I really liked it, I must say. You know, and actually I thought it was very interesting because, I mean, it was probably a cinema half full. It wasn't very full. It was an afternoon screening. I mean, comparatively, much fuller than we'd expect.
Yeah, it's like, it wasn't like packed out, but it's what I would describe as a full cinema.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
The audience was like completely with it, you know, they kind of clapped when MJ and Spider-Man kissed, and, you know, they laughed at all the right places. I found aspects of it quite moving as well. You know, my only thing is it's kind of going to be very difficult to judge this film for me, or to kind of speak about it critically, because the first 20 minutes were out of focus, I'd say.
Yeah, not disastrously, but you went and spoke to them and they did get it fixed, and it wasn't great. You can always tell when you see text on screen, you know, so it was when the title card comes up, when the Sony name comes, all the kind of stuff, you go, oh no, the edges are fuzzy. When characters come on screen, a little bit of fuzziness you sometimes don't notice. And it's funny, actually, later on in the film, it did just suddenly occur to me, is it still out of focus like it was at the start? And at that point, some text came on screen, and I went, oh no, it is in focus. They've tied it up. Yeah. But it was on that cusp for a while.
I thought the screening was awful, that it was out of focus for a very long time at the beginning. And then the projection itself lacked luminosity, right? I think, you know, it was a lot. I bet you when you see it on TV, the colours are going to pop in a completely different way.
It's always different, yeah. I mean,
you know,
with TV, you're staring at a light bulb, effectively. Whereas a cinema screen, it's reflected.
Had we seen it on IMAX, which, you know, I think there's a real downgrading of what cinema is, because I think, you know, this Limax cinema is the way that all cinema should look like, you know, and instead you pay premium for that, and then you're pitted off to smaller cinemas with worse projection systems, right? Because I always feel that the difference, one of the main differences between the IMAX at Cineworld and the non-IMAX at Cineworld is luminosity.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
So that,
and we should say, you know, we didn't have the opportunity to see this in IMAX Digital, Limax, because the Odyssey is dominating that.
Yeah.
So, you know, normally this would be the IMAX option,
exactly,
but it's not today.
So a lot of the visuals, I think, like, because I'm sure they weren't designed to be that
grey.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing.
Um,
And I think part of it is almost a design choice. And I don't mean specifically for this film, but just generally, it's the way that a lot of bigger films seem to look these days. You don't get that vibrancy. And even in IMAX, you still sometimes feel like, where is the expressiveness? Where is the vibrancy in what I'm seeing here?
Well, I must say, I noticed it less on IMAX, but the difference between the IMAX and the non-IMAX seems to be a luminosity that you automatically get on TV. So if they're hoping to rescue the cinematic experience and get people to go back on a big screen, showing it, less bright than what you normally get on a TV is a big mistake, really. Anyway, I really noticed it today because I thought it was meant to be kind of much more colourful than what we were seeing.
Yeah. Although I would say, as a bit of a counterpoint, brightness is not necessarily the be-all and end-all, and it's not necessarily the best thing to have either, because what I remember very clearly is the difference between seeing Avatar at the cinema and then Avatar on TV. And, Avatar we saw proper... It wasn't an IMAX film, but we saw it at what was then, I think, the Birmingham IMAX, or at least the giant screen, and it looked incredible. And when I happened to see it later on TV, it looked a lot worse, and part of that was the brightness. It made it look so much more like the cartoon it kind of always was. But there is something about, if it depends on the film, it depends on the experience, all that kind of stuff. But in that specific instance, the kind of the slight dullness, relative dullness that you got in the cinema compared to the TV made that film work.
Okay, we can agree, and obviously there's specifics here. But actually, I think one of the characteristics about the Cineworld Broad Street, where we see a lot of these films, is a lack of luminosity, and and one can easily compare it to, seeing the film in other places, like at the Mac or even at the Mockingbird. Like,
they're very good projectors.
Yeah, and it's clearly not the case at Cineworld Cinema 2, which is where we saw it today.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
that's my beef for the day.
Reasonable complaint got out of the way. This is not a complaint, but it pissed me off. Is the people behind us who were cheering through the film? So like you want people to be engaged, right? And it's lovely that we had a full audience and so that scene where Spider-Man and MJ kiss, because he would like to be able to kind of reintegrate himself into her life and his other friend's life. And, they've forgotten him because of the spell he had to cast, and is this going to work out? Are they going to be able to... blah, blah, blah. And they have this scene where they kiss, and there was some cheers and applause at that point. Not loads, it was a smattering, but it was particularly from that group that was just sat behind us to our right.
Yeah.
Group of guys there. The moment that happened, I thought, oh, fucking grow up. Like,
oh, no, I love this.
Oh. And I also thought, I'm so glad, because I knew that wasn't going to be her. That was going to be the character who gets into people's heads. It was very obvious. And so I'm really glad that they bought it and then were disappointed when it turned out it wasn't a real kiss. I was very thrilled about that. And then at the end, things eventually come together. And what was it? Where did people cheer at the end? There was cheering, but it was for... Oh, yeah, that's right. Because it's just... Because when he... the end of the film is him approaching Ned, his other mate.
Yes.
In the coffee shop, and them reconnecting, and it turns out there are some memories that still live because their handshake comes back to him, and that's when people cheer. And that was a lovely moment.
Yeah, it's like muscle memory.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe I'm happy to be just a grumpy old man about this. Shut the fuck up in the film, especially if you're a child, especially if it's Marvel.
No, I love. I mean, part of being in a cinema is really not necessarily participating, but just being aware of people's responses, and I'm glad they vocalize them. I think this whole thing about treating the cinema like a theater, is ridiculous. Like, kind of cinemas are always rowdy places, and people laugh, and people cheer, and people don't like stuff, and you vocalizing that is all part of seeing things in a cinema, and I like that because often it takes you out of yourself. It's not what you yourself are necessarily feeling or experiencing, so it's nice to hear what other people are feeling. And sometimes it is what you're feeling, and it's nice to be reinforced.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. And I'm being, overly grumpy for effect in a way, but it does speak to... Yeah, there are films which deserve responses like that don't get them.
You just felt that the film didn't deserve it.
Well, it's because it speaks to the soap opera of the whole thing. Because it's not about what a great cinematic moment this was, how it made me feel. It's about the characters got back together. I love the characters. I've been following this for 15 years. The characters are what
I think it's more than the love of the characters, actually. I think it's also a love of the stars. You know, I mean, I don't know about you, and I don't know if it's just my algorithm, but I've been plastered with Zendaya and Tom Holland information on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, right? All their interviews, the gossip about are they married, are they not married? Yes, they're married. You know, all the premieres, you know, kind of, you know, there are like 30-minute YouTube videos of, you know, how in love Tom Holland is with Zendaya. You know,
I've been not getting that
how
stuff.
cute they are together and so on. So, you know, I think, yeah, this is kind of a married couple, yeah, now kind of playing this kind of iconic comic book couple who are not yet married. I think all of those extra textual things kind of, you know, flow into the experience of watching it in really interesting ways. You know, because I thought in relation to that, I mean, you know, I love both of them really, but this is very clear now in this film that you're not really dealing with Spider Boy as he should have been called up to now, you know, but now it's really like Spider-Man. And actually I was a bit surprised by his body, right? Like he's got a lot of shirtless scenes, right? And it's a man's body now. Well, it's like he's really beefed up, he's really fit, right? But he's really thick, right? In a way that I think until now it's always been almost like a really young man's body. Yeah. So I think kind of, you know, there's a maturing in the film in all kinds of ways, including physically. Right?
I think he's a lot better in this than he was in the Odyssey. I think he's like, what I've discovered is that he absolutely has his place in cinema, and it's doing this. You know, and one thing that we said about the Odyssey was that the character he plays, Telemachus, may actually not have that much to do, which I think is true. But you know, what he's given to do here is it's much more sort of quote unquote obvious acting. It's big gestures. It's, you know, big sadness or big happiness or big surprise, and he's very good at that, and he sells it completely. But it's that kind of star acting as opposed to acting.
You know, let's not belittle star acting, because I think, you know, some of the things he does incredibly well. I think he does all the yearning, kind of really well, which is very difficult, you know, I think for men to do, right? And then he also does what I regard as this kind of manly or blokey, might be better, that whole blokey banter with the Punisher, right? Which then also verges onto the sentimental, right? He gets all the laughs, right? Yeah. And then I think there's real feeling that's evoked as well, yeah? So I thought, you know, that's not easy for an actor.
No, it's not easy, and I really credit it. But it's also, but this is kind of his lane, you know. Feels much better watching him in this than in the Odyssey. This is what he's good at.
I think what I want to point out is that his lane is broader than he's given credit for.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. When it comes to laughs, the side characters make it in because this is, you know, it's Marvel, so some of the other characters we've seen pop in and out, and so we have a little bit of the Punisher, as you say, or a reasonable amount of the Punisher. John Bernthal. We have the Black Widow, who is Florence Pugh.
Who's wonderful. I love her as well.
Who's absolutely wonderful. And Bruce Banner, what's his name? Who plays fucking Bruce Banner? Mark Ruffalo shows up as Bruce Banner and the Hulk. And they all. He's the least comic-y of the three side characters we get.
I found him sexy in this, Mark Ruffalo.
He's very old looking now.
Well, he might be old, but he looks like he's lost a bit of weight. And when he was standing up in the, you know, the lecture podium, I thought he looked quite sexy.
Okay. And clearly your students did as well, because that's what they're there for. Oh, Dr. Banner, tell us more about being the Hulk.
Meow.
But Florence Pugh was great. You know, I haven't caught up. I sort of stopped watching the Marvel stuff and paying real attention to it after 3 or 4 films after Endgame. You know, so I saw a bit of her because they had the Black Widow film where she was involved, and you kind of met her as that kind of family, that Russian spy family, whatever. And she was really funny in that because she always taking the piss out of Scarlett Johansson in that, and she has this very kind of sarky, knowing sense of humour about her, and that carries on here. So there are other things she's been in Thunderbolts, and she mentions the New Avengers, which I'm completely unfamiliar with. I know that there is some sort of New Avengers thing, which will be coming, I assume, in Doomsday, which we got a trailer for beforehand, but I've not followed it. But, you know, clearly she's there, and here she just brings that same sense of humour still. And she's wonderful. She does a lot with the small amount of time she gets. John Bernthal as the Punisher gets a lot more time, and he plays off Tom Holland, I think, really well. And I think
really
that does
chemistry. Yeah.
I think that does speak to a little bit that kind of aging of Spider-Man / Tom Holland that we see. You know, they play off differently if he's a high school student. Maybe not very differently. He is still Peter Parker, and he still is the personality that he is. But you know, there's something about him kind of holding his own against a grown man who is a very violent. I don't really follow the Punisher, but like everything that he kind of is communicating.
He's angry.
Yeah, angry bloke, and he doesn't mind just shooting the fuck out of everything. And he plays off differently when Spider-Man is, you know, like, let's call him 25 or 28 or something, as opposed to actually he's not, is he? Of course he's not. He's because they're still they're still supposed to be in university though, aren't they?
MJ's looking for a job, right?
That's
she turned down a job in a corporation.
So they're not that young, but they're not that old either. He is operating in this kind of weird hinterland of the age that he plays, because sometimes Tom Holland can communicate very young, and sometimes he can communicate a bit older. And we were saying in the Odyssey, you know, he was playing too young for that to make sense.
Yeah, though there's, I mean, the Odyssey is also different because he is meant to be callow and inexperienced and, you know, a youth, right? So I did wonder, and I'll see it again because I'm seeing it again on Monday, but I did wonder if some of the criticisms are the criticisms of the character. I mean, are we reading too much star persona now into the character that he is meant to be evoking, right? Because at least for most of the film until the end, he is meant to be young, weak, inexperienced. Anyway, he's not that here, and I thought, you know, one of the things about the direction, actually, which I thought was very good.
Yeah, so did I.
You know, was that Tom Holland seems to have chemistry with everybody, right? You know, obviously him and MJ, there's, you know, the way of interacting, the way they cut into each other's speech, and so on, the way they bounce off of each other, great. You know, with, is it John Batalon, the guy who plays his best friend? You know, the same thing.
Jacob
Batalon, you know, with John Bernthal, the same thing. With Florence Pugh, the same. You know, so actually, that's partly a credit to, you know, Tom Holland's skill, but also the way that the director is directing the actors. That, you know, that he seems to have chemistry with everybody, really. Yeah.
So the director is Destin Daniel Cretton, which was a name that didn't occur to me as being familiar, but he did Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which was one of the post-Endgame, let's kick in some new characters films, and which we like very much.
Yes.
And he also directed Short Term 12 years ago, which was an indie film, and it was Brie Larson's first film, and it was about a troubled kids kind of help institution type thing, which I remember watching. I wasn't that crazy about it at the time, but I could see why people were. It made like end of year best of lists and stuff.
Right.
He has an eye. He definitely has an eye for interpersonal interactions and directing actors. He also has an eye for action. I think.
I thought so
we
too.
like the action very much in Shang-Chi.
Yes.
As I recall, that, you know, I remember the bus scene in particular was really good fun. And here, you know, there's a certain level of quote unquote standard action that you're kind of used to seeing in Marvel, where just the actions are communicated, and you don't really feel, you just kind of get lost in the action, like it's just and this had very little action that was like that. It was better than I would expect from.
I thought it was very good. I mean, the scene near the end with all the ninjas.
Yeah.
I forget what they're called, right? But, you know, the way that they were orchestrated visually, right? So the way that they came at him, and then they made this pyramid, and then, you know, kind of Spider-Man burst through that pyramid and then bounced back on the pyramid. Yeah, there's a whole kind of visual design. You know who's hitting whom, right? Like, you have a sense of the geography of the thing, of how Spider-Man is getting out of it, right? It was, you know, quite exciting to watch, and it was very visually pleasing. Yeah,
there's a bit where Spider-Man jumps through them vertically and spins round and creates this sort of cylinder of web that captures them all. You go, that's a really nice idea, and then it's visually sold. You know, with the kind of top-down shot, you see them spinning, all that kind of stuff. Works really well. I was kind of unclear on how many ninjas they're supposed to be, because when we're introduced to them right at the start, when he first visits the Department of Damage Control, it's called, where all these attacks are taking place, we meet 5 of them, and they just stand there. And then in that fight, I think we started off with 5, and there seemed to be about 20 by the end.
Yeah,
they just kept on turning up.
There were more than 5. You know, but
you know, but like I guess you whatever you forgive that, it's fine. I guess.
It is fine because you know who the leader is. It was the woman, right? So I didn't mind that. I thought it was very, very well done actually.
And it's also very effectively cross-cut with. So this is one of them spoilers. Jean Grey is the villain, or at least a villain figure for a while in this, and she's mind controlling all of those ninjas. Which is why they're attacking Spider-Man, and so there's kind of, not only have you got this fight going on that's visually exciting, but you also have to cross-cut back to her talking through them, mind controlling them. That works very nicely. Again, it's just it comes across as kind of easy, and it can't be. You've really got to think about how you're communicating this and what you're selling it. Anyway, it works really, really well, and it's very effective.
And the young woman who plays
Jean Grey, Sadie Sink,
is very good.
Who I'm told is in Stranger Things. She looks like a Stranger Things kind of person. She works really well. And there's this thing of, in the Doomsday trailer we saw beforehand, it starts off with Professor X, as played by Patrick Stewart, looking old and looking nervous and stuff. And so clearly, I don't know if they have done stuff with the X-Men characters before, or if this is the first kind of integration of an X-Men character into the MCU so that they can make all this work. But clearly this is an integration in that way, and we're being told, okay, so Jean Grey has a part to play with that. This will be all coming together in Doomsday somehow. I mean, Doomsday, interestingly, I am kind of interested to see, like, it's not being built up in the way that Endgame, Infinity War and Endgame were. Not to, I don't feel the same kind of fervour in the culture about it. Like, people were absolutely so then they made $3 billion, or at least Endgame did. Like, I don't expect Doomsday to do that based on the kind of the level of excitement.
No, I think it would be very difficult for any film to do that nowadays, actually.
But well, how much did the new Avatar make? Did that do $3 billion?
No, I think I might have done 1. Let's look it up.
I will look it up. Hang on a second. Highest grossing movies. Avatar's still top. Endgame is next. The Way of Water, which was the second Avatar.
I think the thing is,
billion.
Which ones are pre-COVID though, and which ones are post-COVID?
Well, The Way of Water is post-COVID.
Right. And
that's
how much did that do?
That made 2.3 billion.
Okay.
I'm looking for the next. Avatar: Fire and Ash is 16th highest with 1.5 billion.
I think that's more like it.
But we'll see. And so, one of the things about Doomsday is Robert Downey Jr. coming back. He's going to be the villain in it. Doctor Doom, is it?
Doctor Doom, yeah.
And there'll be a whole thing about how all the characters are going, "You're Tony Stark. You're supposed to be dead. Ha ha ha." And then it'll turn out. But that's where the X-Men are clearly going to be integrated. This new Avengers that are mentioned are going to be in there.
I was a bit puzzled by that, because to me, the Jean Grey character clearly signaled the beginnings of a new X-Men, right? So what Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen were doing
in that trailer
puzzled me, because, if you have a new Jean Grey, you're going to have a whole new series of X-Men, right?
But that's the question: is are you? Because one thing
inevitably.
Well, yeah, sure, inevitably, but like when? So in the last Spider-Man film, we had 3 generations of Spider-Mans all put together. Because the multiverse makes it available to you, so we can have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland together. There are no rules as far as that goes anymore, and because people are still in love with Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen as their characters, you'll do everything you can to bring them back. Why would you make an excuse to...
Well, because you want new people, young people.
Well, they
want to reignite a franchise, and let's be frank. I mean, Patrick Stewart is younger, but Ian McKellen, if he lasts past lunch, people will be happy.
But I mean, this is also why Robert Downey Jr. is coming back, right? Like, Robert Downey Jr. made the MCU. He was Iron Man in the first film that started it off, and he had all this personality, and the MCU was him. His death at the end of Endgame was like a major reason probably why I stopped watching it, because he's such an important character now was no longer there, and bringing him back is like, well, people haven't been interested in this nearly as much for the last, what's it been, 5, 6, 7 years. Get Robert Downey Jr. back. He's that important, even though he's however old he is, 60 something maybe.
Yes, I mean he'll be more or less my age.
So like
which actually
those legacy
was
actors.
One of the things that really, made me sit up, because of course Aunt May is, you see her tombstone, and it's like 1964, 2024, and I thought, you get to a stage in life where you see tombstones with people who are younger than you, but who are meant to be old, right? So you go, Anyway, I was watching these interviews, really, I mean, not worth investing time in, but really interesting nonetheless, with Tom Holland saying that, speaking about the differences in working with Nolan and working in the Spider-Man films. And he was saying that, the thing about the Spider-Man films is that you went in there and often there was like a whole choreography of a spectacular scene, or a scene of action, or a set piece, right? But the script wouldn't be written yet, right?
Yeah.
And you had no idea where really the film was going. So the emotive narrative thread was set pieces sewn together and filling in the gaps between them. Whereas one of the advantages, theoretically, in quotation marks, about having postponed this film so that he could do the Odyssey beforehand, right? Because that was designed, was the script got kind of more attention and more work and so on. So I'm not quite sure of that, because I was also surprised to learn that the last Spider-Man film was 2021. Yeah, I thought it was more recent, the last Tom Holland.
That's why he looks so much older now.
Yeah, exactly, because he is, that much older. It's the difference between, early mid-20s or 30, right? But anyway, I do think that this film is more, for me, more emotional. Like it kind of, and it is thematically kind of linked, right? It's interesting that all first 3 films have home in the title, right? Whereas kind of, this brand new day is all about the loss of home, about being alone, about being kind of disconnected, about loss, right? And about kind of attempting to reconnect, right? To make connections. I thought kind of, that was very sweet and touching.
Yeah. The story I heard about Tom Holland and the Odyssey is along similar lines, but the vibe was more like working on the Odyssey, he discovered what working on a real film was actually like, and he kind of came back and said, "Can we work on the script?" Actually, like, other people write the script first.
Yeah.
No, so like
he's worked on other films.
Well,
with scripts.
Yeah. But it is like the way that these things go. It's like you have the film and then you have an extended period of reshoots always, and it's usually things like make little shots that make the action work again. Like an eyeline match needs to be caught and that sort of thing. Sometimes it's a lot more extensive than that, but you do get these things where, like, one of the sort of strategies around which a Marvel movie is made is the action starts, and the story comes later to fill it in, as you say. And
it's a mistake.
He apparently thought that maybe you could not do it like that. But as to how much of that made it into this film's production, or how much will change the way they make them in future, who knows?
Yeah. Well, you see, I do like this on a certain level anyway. I like this film better than the other ones, really, because I did find it more touching and more I think what I liked about the other film was its poppiness and its youthfulness.
Yeah,
right. And I think what I like about this one is that it still has all the action, and it's quite amusing and so on, but it also has kind of depth loosely used. I mean, it's not the deepest film in the universe, right?
I know what you mean, though, right? I think one of the things about Spider-Man that was always so interesting, and maybe the defining thing about Spider-Man, was that he was a kid, and he was having to deal with stuff that was way above his age. And he was having to, like, he had school, and he had his friends, and he had trying to get a job on the side, delivering pizzas or whatever he would do. And then on top of that, he has all this power, he has responsibility that comes with it, as we're always reminded. And how does a kid handle all this? Now he's very much not a kid. He's sacrificed an awful lot that we've seen in the last film. All his friends are graduating, getting jobs, or everyone his age is graduating, getting jobs, and we start off the film with him. We probably haven't seen him in the Tom Holland incarnation fighting the street level crime all that much. Like pretty much from the start, he was getting involved in the Avengers and fighting big enemies. And here we have quite a long period of him on the street, facing familiar villains. He still faces like Scorpion and Punisher and whoever, but this is like street level New York crime that we're used to him fighting. That it's like his kind of bread and butter from the comics and whatever. And you do get this thing of him overextending himself, but it's not with trying to keep the demands of being a kid together, but it's actually the demands of kind of adulthood.
But also it's the demands of finding yourself and accepting yourself, right? Because a lot of the struggles in the film are about things that don't work. And they don't work because he's unwilling to he doesn't trust himself to be himself, right? So, he's got to readjust to the web's working or not working, or natural web, or the web devices, right? And actually that does tie into that ultimate theme that you've just gotta accept yourself, right? Like, accept that change is part of your life and that you become something slightly different.
So one of the reasons that Bruce Banner shows up here, I think, is because Spider-Man is going through his own Hulk thing, which I would have liked a little more detail on in a way. We start off with him overextending himself and trying to fight all this crime, and the police commissioner, whoever she is, who's in contact with him all the time, is saying like, you're doing too much, you've got to chill out. And he's having all these headaches. You're still getting those headaches, she asks him. So we start off with him, a physical toll is being taken on him. And then we get this thing about how his arachnid hormones are too high, and they are turning him into, or can turn him into, it's basically like a testosterone overload. Is basically how it plays out. His eyes turn black and he becomes very aggressive and very strong. And
paradoxically loses his powers, though.
Well, nearly loses himself.
Because he doesn't have the spider sense, and
the sense, because he can detect Jean Grey when she's possessing people until he can't. On the other hand, he develops that organic web that there was a joke when he meets the other two Spider-Mans in the last film. Tobey Maguire could always shoot web straight out of his wrists, and the other two had to have devices to do that, and they're like, what the fuck? But now he can do that all of a sudden. So what's happening? I kind of wish I would have liked a little bit more detail on actually what's going on, or why that's happening, but we do get talk about kind of gene expression and stuff, because he goes to see Bruce Banner about, can this be suppressed? But that's why he's there, right? Like, he's having to... In fact, it reminded me really of Spider-Man 3, the Sam Raimi one, where the symbiote gets him and Venom takes over, and he turns to a different expression of himself. He becomes his own kind of villain. So like that thing of there's something inside him always that could come out in a bad way, and how does he handle that? I think the film is like absolutely aiming at that theme. Whether it nails it or not, I'm not sure. It does seem a bit easy at the end when he just decides that he can be both, and to combine the two. So then when his eyes go black at the end, and he turns into, mega strong, super strong, super evil Spider-Man kind of thing, he can then get his eyes back to normal, and he can do the both.
I think in this film it's not shown as an evil or non-evil.
No.
It's shown as him rejecting psychosomatically and kind of through his unconscious that which is part spider, right?
Yeah.
So
I just think that it's not... It's
not like the symbiote, because the symbiote is an external thing onto you, right?
Yeah, no.
And this is, a kind of, a development of who you in fact are that's kind of brought about by age.
Yeah. But what it ultimately doesn't sell me on is the way in which he's able to reconcile that at the end. The kind of emotional journey that's led him there, I didn't quite buy it. It comes across as quite easy that he can decide, I am both Peter Parker and Spider-Man, I don't have to choose. I don't think enough a lot of time was spent on talking about gene suppression and the inhibitor chip that he wants to develop,
and the dangers of that,
and too little time was spent on who am I and how do I feel about this.
I don't agree. I think that is Peter Parker's main problem throughout from the beginning of the film onwards, I think it's very interesting because you have this exchange with the Florence Pugh character at the beginning, which, why don't you take your mask off, blah, 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 and then you have all these contrasts because Jean Grey is a version of Spider-Man in what she's going through, and the Hulk is a version of Spider-Man in what he's going through, and they're all slightly different, right? Because when Bannon becomes the Hulk, he becomes an out of control other being, really literally another being, right? Which is not quite what happens, to Spider-Man, and in fact, I think that change in Spider-Man is what he realizes about himself that he then teaches to John Grey. So I'm sure there are other things to discover, but I think, one of the signs of this being a better screenplay than normal, in these Spider-Man films is how you can see, all of these things kind of built into the narrative that the Spider-Man character is meant to be, opposite or in tension with or slightly different to, or...
It's definitely building in those oppositions and those reflections between him and other characters. But I don't think it's a better script than I've seen before. I think it's a collection of underdeveloped themes in that respect. Yeah. It wasn't satisfying enough in that way. Yeah. But I do see where it's aiming, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
I liked it, I enjoyed the acting. I enjoyed the action sequences. I think, this is kind of an important departure in making an adult of Spider-Man. And I did find it really touching at times. And actually, the audience applauding spontaneously in a commercial film in, a Saturday afternoon at Cineworld in a lousy projection, it's, I think, quite an achievement.
Well, we saw the same thing in Infinity War and Endgame, didn't we?
Which one?
Infinity War and Endgame. Certainly in Endgame. I don't remember if the stuff happened in Infinity War, because that is setting up the stuff that will get resolved in Endgame. But at the end of Endgame, and when Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, flies into Captain America's hand, people erupted. And that's in this country. I mean, you see videos of people watching films in America, they erupt in every film.
Right.
Here it happens sometimes, very rarely, and it was quite remarkable to see. Well, but just like this is how fucking idiots react.
There are very few films in a non-festival setting that get applause at the end. This is one of them.
Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't begrudge that.
I do. Do you applaud at the end of an episode of EastEnders? Yeah.
Well, it would have to be a really spectacular episode.
Yeah, well, this wasn't. That's what I'm saying.
Well, this was good enough to elicit that applause, because I actually don't think it was just like blind fandom. Yeah, I think people did appreciate the film, and that's significant.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, people might have liked the film more than you, but I think they enjoyed it. It was clear.
They did. And I kind of enjoyed it too, but this is ultimate. I think the response is down to love of the characters and not love of the film.
Well, in that case, credit to them for having dealt with the characters in such a way that it didn't betray the audience's expectations.
Oh, generosity shines out of you like...
Well, credit where credit is due.
There is a certain degree of credit to be given. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it. And it is interesting to me that I am suddenly interested in seeing Doomsday before having watched this, just from the trailers of Doomsday.
Yes.
And I suppose having heard about Robert Downey Jr. returning, despite Marvel having lost me since Endgame, I'm interested in my own response. Why am I suddenly interested in going back? Well, clearly there's an event happening, and people are coming back in various ways. We saw in the trailer that Captain America is coming back, and I don't think that's something that anyone has set up. That seems to be a surprise that's been left for the trailer. I'm not sure that's been set up in any TV show or previous film. Yeah. It seems to have, it seems to be in the trailer as a surprising hook.
Yes.
So we will see. It'll be interesting for you to see the Odyssey on Monday.
It will.
Something that occurred to me, partly because I'd seen an interview just recently with Hoyte van Hoytema, who is Christopher Nolan's director of photography, has been for quite a few films. He was talking about shooting in IMAX, and obviously he's got to be the most experienced person in the world at shooting in IMAX at this point, He was talking about framing for IMAX and how you center everything, because with the screen enveloping your vision to the extent that it does, you can't have things at the edge of the screen because your head's swiveling like this.
Exactly.
And you end up with a really distorted thing. And I thought, actually, that's actually really limiting, Because I'm watching this today in a regular cinema screen with the reservations that we said about it's not bright enough and all the colours are dulled down. But there are interesting framings here.
Sure.
Characters on each side of the screen, the circular shot going down, all that kind of stuff. The director has had the ability to choose interesting ways of showing things.
Yes.
And I think for all the qualities you get out of IMAX and the impressive scale that you feel, you see a lot less of that in IMAX. You do have to centre the frame. The idea that Hoyt van Hoytema is talking about, I become a centre framer. It's like, how does that sound to you? That sounds limiting. That sounds like, well, that's the way I have to do things because there's a physical limitation on people watching this. I feel slightly opposed to that, personally.
Yeah.
You
no,
know?
I mean, I think there is something to discuss. One shouldn't over-fetishize IMAX, right? For that reason, like if it does involve central framing, that is a limitation. Yeah, and also it's a signal that cinema has now become, or certainly IMAX, an elite art for the elite. The expectation and the norm is that most people around the world will not get to see it in its ideal form.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is contrary to cinema as a mass art, really. So that is something that you mentioned last week, but that is kind of also worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, there is one other thing I want to say about that, which is an interview I saw with Christopher Nolan, or a clip of one where he was asked, how do you frame? So we talked about this last time, we talked about it in Tenet. When you're making a film that is going to be shown in a number of very different aspect ratios, how are you framing? What takes priority? Does something take priority? How are you thinking about that? And what he said, and I wasn't sure I believed this, but what he said was that he frames for the widest aspect ratio. So the one that's going to crop out the most of the top and bottom of the frame. He frames for that, and then essentially, I'm paraphrasing him, but essentially considers the expansions into the top and bottom as kind of bonuses, or
Then why film it in IMAX? Because that is what IMAX provides.
I mean, if
IMAX
IMAX is supposed to be the thing, then surely you are shooting for IMAX first and foremost. To me, it has started to get. I've always really loved seeing movies in IMAX.
I love seeing them,
and you're going to really enjoy it on Monday.
Yeah.
But I have started with this film, The Odyssey. We're not talking about Spider-Man anymore. But I've started to really question all of that because I do now start to see it as really anti-democratic. There are only a few places in the world where you can see The Odyssey in full IMAX. There are not many of these cinemas around. You're having to travel to London to see it. Otherwise, you'd have to travel to Bradford or Manchester. It's not available, right? And the way that most people are going to see this is cropped, essentially. But
that's not a reason to not do it. I mean, because I was thinking about this, and it's quite different.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about this in relation to filmed plays. Yeah, that you go see the play at the National Theatre, and then it gets broadcast to the provinces, right? And of course you're not seeing a play; it's a completely different experience. Yeah, what you're seeing is like a bad film of a play, right, or a quickly made film or television show of the play, right? And yet, obviously, kind of people still throng to see it because it's still something that they value. And I think maybe seeing the different versions of a film where the IMAX is the ideal for some, not for all, right? And then kind of others are, better to have this experience than not have any at all.
Yeah.
But yes, I think it is inherently kind of a change in cinema. Yeah, that, instead of bringing CinemaScope or to all the cinemas, you actually, it's like Cinerama, I suppose, that you have to go to this particular cinema to get that particular experience. But we'll see how this develops. Anyway, it has very little to do with Brand New Day.
Yeah, but it just goes to show how interesting Brand New Day isn't. So there you go.
Anyway.
I'd still rather talk about The Odyssey.
I think we can safely say that we all enjoyed it very much.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So thank you all very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and Instagram, where I do occasional clips.
Which are great.
Oh. At Eavesdropping at the Movies, I guess. Is it at on Instagram? I still don't really know
Yes,
how to use
I
it.
think so.
Eavesdropping at the Movies there. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you all very much.
Bye-bye.